Yes, I'm very familiar with the school system, and in some respects, for the area where you are, it's an excellent school. But when it comes to special education, it's not a good school system, and it's not a good school system because of the leadership that's running your particular school system, and that's unfortunate but true. And I found this to be true, guys. I've been doing this a long time, and there's a few school districts that have had really bad special education directors, and then um, once they retire or they leave, it's amazing how with somebody different that comes in with a different attitude, a different perspective, um, a different leadership style, things change. And then all of a sudden you see a decrease in the number of complaints and people are getting along. There's always going to be that echo boom that because of the damage. It's sort of like a comet that has a tail. The bad one's going to leave and then carry the trash behind it, and it's going to take a couple of school years because the culture within the district has been established through that administrator's training and policies. And until the new one comes in there, some of the loyalists are going to continue to do it like their old boss that they had loyalty to, because public education's like a little screwed up military. I've never understood it, but this hierarchy and this code of loyalty and this authority that they trump over people that have the same degrees. Like I have attorneys that work with me, and I purposely say work with me, all right, instead of work for me. You're never going to hear me say that. Well, I'm saying it now because I'm using it as an example. But I don't look at it. They have the same law degree I do. They passed the same rigors of the same tests that I did. You know. Now, of course, do we have varying degrees of talents, but everybody brings something to the table. And I'm open to listening to all their different ideas and the different ways that they do things. And I can tell you that when we lay out the cases, I'm going to think about that. I'm always going to think, who is a better fit for this case? And it's not always me. My thing tends to be more, the behavior side of things. Blame it on my libertarian nature, but I just cannot stand the egresses of government. Cannot stand the trampling on people's rights, and especially children, and especially children with disabilities. I think it's repugnant. We should be better as adults. We're not, but I can't sit there and say that we're somehow unique in the span of history, but here's a good question. And I'm not going to name the school system, but your son autism and has an immune system disorder, which has kept your son home for the entirety of the school year. And they are wanting him to come back in April for state testing, and he's already upset, which is going to do nothing but cause problems. And they're obsessed with the state testing. And what can you do about that? Well, what you can do is waive his participation in the end of year testing. The end of year testing has nothing to do with your son, has nothing to do with his requirements per the state standards of being able to progress to the next grade, has zero to do with it. This has everything to do, the end of year high stakes testing has everything to do with the school's personal report card per the requirements of every Student Succeeds Act. Before that, it was No Child Left Behind. Has nothing to do with your kid. Has everything to do with the personal report card of your school system. So therefore, why put your child through that when it has nothing to do with your child? They're using your child in order to benefit themselves as a school system as to whether or not they taught your child. But your child hasn't been there all year for in person, and they really haven't provided him anything tangible. But yet they want to subject him to this. Why? Because it's not that they really care that he's there. It's just that they have to show a percentage of participation for, the masses. How many kids are enrolled? They're going to have a percentage participation rate that they have to record. But at the same time, I did a video. I don't know, it maybe a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, and I put it on this page. And what I can do is go back and find it. Or I can attach the document here. But you can waive his participation. You don't have to agree to have him participate in this. They cannot force you to participate. There's your solution. And I wouldn't feel guilty about it as a parent. Your son's emotional and psychological well-being supersedes their desire to have him participate in some statewide high-stakes testing that has zero to do with your son's education and everything to do with them. I'm one of these people. I think we should get rid of these high-stakes tests. I think they've been extremely negative. I think that they've done nothing but perpetuate the systemic differences and disparities. And I can get into that in the future if you guys are interested. But I can sit there and explain top to bottom, why the insertion of high stakes testing during No Child Left Behind, which then the Obama administration, kept and maintained little bitty changes in Every Student Succeeds Act when it replaced No Child Left Behind. Why did we need to replace it with another high stakes test? Who benefits from that? I can tell you who benefits. But what nobody ever looks at is the damage done on the bottom, because there are 4 subgroups that are tracked in high stakes testing. 4 subgroups. Now, what are the subgroups? The subgroups are the groups in this country that have been historically left behind, okay, which is sort of where No Child Left Behind came from, is the idea that there's a segment of children within our society that are historically been left behind. Now, that's true, but I think that it would be stupid of us, which, of course, we're already there as far as the stupid is concerned, of applying simplistic reasons and then trying to fix it with more government, when quite frankly the government is probably the main reason why we have these disparities to begin with. Why do you think we have the IDEA? The IDEA was put in there because of an acknowledgement by the federal government that special education kids with disabilities have been historically disenfranchised. And so that was put in with some funding in order to safeguard and protect our kids, because of a historical acknowledgement of how they were treated, or not even acknowledged, or not even allowed into the schools. Okay? Then we have desegregation. We have all of these factors to sit there and try to remedy the past mistakes of people that are long dead gone, guys. But I think what's crazy is that this was done by government. It wasn't done by individual people. But I think that we tend to judge individual people or individual groups depending on the hue of their skin or their gender. And that's a crazy, crazy ass way to look at life, guys. And I hope that you're not jumping on this victimology, train that's running crazy in this country right now. It just is insane. These problems have multiple factors and multiple players and multiple institutions involved. It's not just one. Most of them are government or corporate because there's benefit there, okay? But let's not fall into that. So for those of you who stayed around for this aspect, there's 4 groups that have been historically disenfranchised, with regards to testing scores. How do we raise those? What do we need to do to get better? And like I said, if you're interested, I can provide you that full background so you understand all of the different pieces and all the different players. Instead of jumping on this thing of systemic this, systemic that, and it's not all about that. There are other reasons, and then some of those reasons you would be rather shocked as to the source. All right. So before you jump on that, understand, I'd be more than happy to explain it from beginning to end in order for you guys to understand, why I do not agree with this high stakes into years testing. Because what it did at the end of the day was create a motivation within the education system. And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what gender, what race, what ethnicity somebody is who is in administration and education. They are chasing the same thing, and that is to be the best, at least on paper, at what they do. And they don't want to sit there and be dinged as a principal or as a superintendent or anything else within the system, because of these high stakes testing scores. And then how the federal government or the state is making them calculate these numbers. Is it right? No. But are humans human? Yes. Okay. So what are the 4 subgroups? The 4 subgroups are poverty level, poor, African American, Latino, and special education. These are the four groups that the federal government tracks with regards to these high stakes testing. And according to their little formula, the crazy little formula that they came up with, if a particular school is allowed to have a percentage of their students be in one or more of these 4 subgroups, and if they stay underneath that percentage, then the aggregate of the subgroup is not calculated into the school's big score. So it then becomes something that's beneficial for schools, let's say on the special education side, to try to over-identify kids, let's say in Alabama, with the Alabama Alternative Assessment, the AAA, where kids on the AAA don't have to take the end-of-year high-stakes test. Well, there's also a lot of negative ramifications if you stick a kid on a AAA before it's proper to identify them as AAA. But see, that the motivation for the school isn't whether or not it's a benefit to the kid, it's whether or not that kid's score could potentially be a harm to the district. And in some schools, not all of them, in some schools, that's exactly how they play the AAA game. Is they identify kids, and that's why the federal government put in a stopper that said you can only have so many kids on an alternative assessment path. Well, if they don't have the alternative assessment path, then how do you get rid of your excess special education students within a given school? You suspend them. Or you create little specialized programs at failing schools, which tend to be your high minority schools. Now, that was all intended by gerrymandering boundaries. But like I said, I can explain all of that, how it all works. I know what, So in your particular situation, I hope you understand that these high stakes tests have nothing to do with your child. And no parent should ever, no student should ever get into some kind of an emotional, anxiety-ridden path when these are government mandates that have nothing to do with your child. And it's a system that sort of has its own life. We should have gotten rid of it when we got rid of No Child Left Behind, instead of just reinvent it in a different way. It's done more damage than good. And quite frankly, I think it's part of the reason that we're perpetuating these ideas of systemic whatever in our society today, without truly reflecting as to where it all started. Because, now we have things like property values and gentrification. All of those things are all connected, guys. They're all connected. because now real estate's connected to, a school score, and people want to live in, where the schools are better. Are the schools really better, or are the schools playing the game, and of course parents want to move into better schools. Well, parents want to move into better schools. That has nothing to do with race or ethnicity, does it? But yes, it can have everything to do with your socioeconomic, whether you have the money to move into these schools that tend to be higher priced. Why is that? Now, is that purposeful, or is it part of our capitalistic supply and demand? More people want to live here, less people want to live here. But if the scores here are in the toilet, why are they in the toilet? We need to analyze that. Are they in the toilet in part because the union is rabidly against giving parents in that area a monetary option to be able to take tax money and send their child to a better performing school? Because that's happening all over the country. That's just one example. There's many others. But I am not one to where a zip code should determine whether or not your child gets a good education. But like I said, all of the different groups, from unions to political parties, all these other things are playing a role into limiting access to better schools. And so therefore the bad schools can continue to be the bad schools, and they can continue to get huge amounts of funding from the federal government, even that surpass some of the better schools with regards to how much that they are able to get per student. Yet the accountability and the having to answer for the bad results, we just don't do it. We don't do it for a myriad of reasons. So therefore we perpetuate why these four subgroups can't seem to improve substantially. Now, they can. They have. They do. All right? So it's a myth if anybody jumps on that train that we aren't getting better as a society. That's just a lie. We are getting better as a society. But what I am telling you is that these crazy things that are all interconnected now, that have woven into a nasty little fabric that are just clogging the toilet, guys. So we have a lot of waste sitting up here that can't flush because no child left. All this thing has created this web, have prevented it from being able to flush and have us continue to flush the negative in our society. Societies are always working toward flushing the negative. And that's why I'm telling you, we should always be analyzing what we're doing wrong and what we could be doing better. Instead of blaming this race, this ethnicity, this gender, that's a wrong way to look at life. And historically, guys, it's just, why? Why would you do something like that? Many people are getting caught into that trap. There are more complex reasons why, and everybody had a part to play. Everybody had a part to play. It isn't one gender, it isn't one ethnicity, it is one race. And it's simplistic for people to jump on the hate wagon and the blame wagon because you don't have the thought process or the patience to be able to look at it and realize that maybe you had a part to play. I'm always trying to self-analyze, and I'm always trying to improve, and I'm always trying to think through society's problems so I can raise my kids better, so I can be better personally. I implore you to please do that. We can change our education system, and we can unravel this, and we can flush that proverbial toilet, guys. We can. You got to know why it's clogged, though. You got to know why it's clogged.